everybody, welcome back to Relax with Animal Facts, or I guess if you're new, welcome for the first time. This is a podcast where I dive into a new animal every twice a week, and get to explore some animals with you guys, and I refer to them as our furry, scaly, or possibly slimy friends. And in this case, today's episode, we're looking at more of the slimy kind of animals now. We're looking at a poison dart frog, which is a really cool amphibian. We're going to get into the facts in just 1 second. How I always open up the show, I tell you just a few things that possibly we have, or I have, I guess, going on, and maybe the future of the show or something like that, or how you can listen to the show. So first, I'm just going to always start off by saying, of course, right now this podcast is absolutely ad-free. If you want to help support the show, share with a friend. It is something that helps the show immensely, and I thank all of you guys for listening and for doing that. If you want to hear your animal on the podcast, maybe you have a special animal that you've always loved that you want to hear, and it could even be a subspecies of something that we've already covered. Whatever you'd like to send in, you can go to relaxwithanimalfacts.com and click on animal requests, and you can go ahead and send me something anonymously or not. I will say the name on the podcast, for the one that is chosen, if your animal is chosen. So I look forward to hearing from all of you, and let's get into how you can listen to the show. So this show is primarily for having a healthy focus for you guys. So it's relaxing, safe environment, and you can just listen to some animal facts. You can space in and out. You can be 100% attentive. It is all entirely up to you, and every form of listening is absolutely encouraged. So you could be in traffic right now going to work. Maybe the traffic's bad. Maybe you're at work and you have some stuff to do. You can throw on the podcast and you can just listen. And I'm going to be with you guys here for in between 20 and 35 minutes, somewhere in between. It really depends how rich we have in facts, or possibly I might go off on something related to the animal, or maybe not. I guess sometimes we get a little sidetracked, but we always make it right back on and we keep pushing forward. So there's a multitude of ways of listening, and however you decide to listen is completely up to you. The most popular way I see is that a lot of you use it as a bedtime ritual before you go to sleep. You'll throw on the podcast, maybe you fall asleep to the podcast. So no matter what, listening to animals and having a healthy focus is always a good thing to do. I got my facts for this episode from thoughtco.com and from National Geographic, so those two. The main ones I got was from the first one I mentioned there, the ThoughtCo. We have a good amount of facts for this episode, so I'm excited to get into it. So why don't we just get into it right now? Let's start the show. So the poison dart frog is a small tropical frog that is in the family Dendrobatidae. So that is I'm glad that I said that right the first time. So I'm going to clear something up really fast because a lot of us haven't reviewed taxonomy in a very long time, maybe in biology class back in high school. But they are small tropical frogs in the family. So there's a family here, Dendrobatidae. So how it works, taxonomy, we start from domain down to kingdom, down to phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. And, if you want to actually know these, there's a very cool mnemonic that you can use. A mnemonic device is just making things easier for you to learn. King Philip came over from Great Spain. Take the first letter of each of those. King, we got kingdom. Philip, we got phylum. Came, class, over, order, from, family, great, genus, and species is the Spain part. So King Philip came over from Great Spain, and King Philip was he was a ruler of one of the largest empires in I believe Spain. So it's not a history class, so I'm not going to go over that. But if you want to know, that's a cool mnemonic that also makes sense because he was a ruler of one of the largest empires ever, part of the Golden Age, I believe. So I'm not going to go too deep into that. But yeah, so King Philip came over from Great Spain, if you want to remember taxonomy. So they are in the family of Dendrobatidae. And let's talk about one of the reasons that they are called the poison dart frog. We're going to get into the origin of the name in a sec. I'm sure you guys can figure it out, probably. But they secrete mucus that can do a lot of damage. So these, the ones that are toxic or poisonous, can do a lot of damage. Other members of the same family, however, might not be toxic, and they will use other sorts of mechanisms to survive. So we're going to talk about that now. So they are amphibians. Okay, so these guys are amphibians. So frogs are amphibians. And what are amphibians? They are cold-blooded vertebrates of a class that comprises frogs, so in this case frogs, newts, which we've also covered on another episode, toads, and salamanders. I'm sure that there's more in there. They are distinguished from other animals by having an aquatic gill-breathing larval stage that is followed typically, not always, but typically by a terrestrial lung-breathing adult stage. So we see that these guys do not have to be in water at all times to breathe. So they do have terrestrial lung-breathing stages, so it absolutely checks out. So they're not too big. They're about 1/2 inch to 2.5 inches in size, and they weigh about 1 ounce. So very small, but don't let the size deceive you, because these guys really can pack a punch when it comes to what they have going on internally. So there are a total of 170 species and 13 genera. So genera is the plural form of genus, in case you didn't know, of the poison dart frogs. And only 4 species in the genus, which is Philobates. I'm going to say that quick, maybe it sounds a little smoother. Were documented to have been used for blow dart tips. So only 4 of the species were documented to being used by humans for this sort of gain, which is blow dart tips that they can tip with poison, of course. And most poison dart frogs are brightly colored for a reason. So we've already covered a lot of reasons on the podcast, but I don't believe we've covered this one specifically. Bright colors can usually indicate to animals that, hey, don't eat me because I could kill you, because I am poisonous or toxic, so don't take the risk, it's not worth it. So these bright colors are used as a communication, or more rather as a warning to other animals or predators, saying, don't eat me, you're going to regret that, it's not going to be good for either of us, it's a lose-lose situation. And it would absolutely be a lose-lose situation for those that are toxic or poisonous. And another example of this are in monarch butterflies. They have an extremely bright set of colors, and coral snakes as well. So they seem to, they're not alone with these whole bright colors indicating toxic potential. There are a lot of animals that do so. So warning signals are important not only for not only for the prey, but also for the predators that would kind of like to have them as lunch, because it's a lose-lose situation most of the time. And the non-toxic frogs, because a lot of them don't have those bright colors to indicate toxicity, because they're not toxic, I guess it wouldn't hurt to be bright even though you're not toxic, and I'm sure that animals like that exist. But they instead have a coloration that is used to help them blend into their environment rather than warn others of their toxicity. So we see camouflage here. So camouflage, again, super important. This is why forests are most likely, or this is most likely why they really thrive in forests, because they have a good deal of green and yellow and these sorts of colors that really blend in. And camouflage is an important thing, especially for smaller creatures to be able to survive, because it can be tough if you really stand out. They live in the tropical and subtropical rainforests and wetlands of Central and South America. So this would include Nicaragua, Costa Rica. I might butcher some of these names, guys. I apologize. Suriname or Suriname, I'm not sure. Panama, French. It looks like Guyana, but I don't believe that's how you pronounce this one. Guyana, Bolivia, Colombia, Ecuador, Venezuela, Brazil. Then we have Guyana, and that's it. So they were introduced into Hawaii by humans. It wasn't exactly natural from what I read, but so they live in tropical, subtropical rainforests and wetlands as well. So they really thrive off of having temperate environments and moisture. So moisture is super important for these guys. And they are omnivores. So the tadpoles are omnivores as well. This is because they will feed not only on algae, but also other things that are present in the water. So there might be some debris floating around. There might be some dead insects, insect larvae. So this is why they are not just herbivores. So you would think of frogs generally as you would think herbivores for the most part, but they do have a good amount of insects, including the tadpoles, those small guys. And some species will eat each other in terms of the tadpoles, so they will sometimes try to go for each other. I assume it's like a game of Snake, kind of. I don't know if you guys have played that game before, but it's as if everyone's just trying to get bigger than the other person so they can eat them up. And that seems to be the deal here for some species, not all of them. And the adults will capture ants and termites and other small invertebrates. So they are really important for the ecosystem that they're in, because the second we see this as a big problem. I actually watched a documentary recently about stuff to do specifically for aquatic wildlife. So squid has been greatly prosperous because of the reduction of their natural predators. And while this may seem great, this can throw the ecosystem completely off balance, because nature has a wonderful balance that it strikes with, just the way that it is. It has a way of kind of self-correction, but humans really don't allow for self-correction a lot of the time. So they're incredibly important to their ecosystems, which is why it's important that we preserve their habitat. And you might be thinking, where does their poison come from? How does this work? So in their case, it's majority from diet. So alkaloids they will get from arthropods and accumulate and are secreted eventually through the frog's skin. So arthropods, if you're wondering, they form the phylum of, here we go, Euarthropoda, which includes insects, arachnids, myriapods, and crustaceans. So these are invertebrate animals that have an exoskeleton. So those are all those are all examples of that. So just in case you didn't know what an arthropod is, and maybe you don't know what an alkaloid is, surely it's not common knowledge. Alkaloids are nitrogenous compounds that have the capabilities of having physiological effects on animals, and that includes humans. So that includes things like certain drugs, right? Like when you see morphine or other sorts of things, and poisons as well. So poisons are toxins. So that's where it falls. So a lot of these arthropods, just like we covered, arachnids, for example, right? Arachnids do have a good deal of, well, not all of them, but some of them have a good deal of these alkaloids. So they have venom or poisons, things like that, right? So they accumulate it from their diet. So we see how the diet is, they must have a very interesting sort of diet. So they secrete these alkaloids, so they have it on the outside of their body, and it's an interesting sort of relationship that it has with the toxins, because for them it's very important to their survival. So the toxins can vary in potency. The most toxic one would be the golden poison frog. It's a good name for the top dog when it comes to toxicity potential. So most toxic, golden poison frog. That's interesting. So let's go back to the diet for just 1 second. I just had a thought, because diet seems to have an incredible effect on animals, just like we covered, I think it was episode 5 or 6, with the flamingo. That is the very tall flightless bird that we covered. But very interesting facts about that one. If you haven't listened to that podcast, go ahead and listen to it. But they get their color from their diet. I think it was called beta carotene or something like that. I hope that was what it was called. But they got it from the pigments in the food that they ate, the crustaceans that they ate. So we see that diet can play an important role anatomically, physiologically, in a lot of animals out there. So let's move on. Each frog contains approximately 1 milligram of the poison batrachotoxin. See if I can say it a little faster. Batrachotoxin, that might be better. And that has the potency to kill actually 10,000 mice or 10 to 20 people. So we're talking the same animal that weighs, or that is about a half inch to 2.5 inches in size, and weighing about 1 ounce has the potential to kill a lot of people. That's 10 to 20 people, right? So that is a formidable opponent if I've ever read about one. And the toxin works by preventing nerve impulses from transmitting the signal to relax certain muscles. So, of course, this will cause many problems, not just things like hypercontraction there, where it's contracting nonstop and you can't really do much about it. But that has a great effect on things like heart function, because as you know, the heart will relax and contract all the time, so it'll really mess with that, and it's not good, obviously. So that's how it works. That's how a lot of toxins work, I believe. And there are no antidotes for this poison at the current moment. So just don't eat one or pick one up, okay? It's definitely not a good idea. But you might be wondering, like I was wondering, how do some of these animals not die to their own toxins, right? How does this work? And apparently they have their own special sort of sodium channels. So they have sodium channels in their system, which we have sodium channels as well, but I assume they have specialized ones. And it is immune to its own poison because of it. And predators can also develop immunity to the toxin, I suppose. I imagine that this would happen over time, of course, as evolution pushes for it, that maybe they were dying a lot to certain kinds of toxins, and maybe a few members of the population got exposed to just enough of the toxin to survive, but also to build an immunity to it, because we have an interesting sort of immune system, and a lot of animals do, where we are able to build cells that remember either the infection or things like that, so we can become immune to it. So the next time it's present in our system, it's not a complete surprise. We have cells that are ready to go and ready to replicate. If you haven't learned about the immune system, it is frankly incredible, to say the least. Our body is so intricate in so many ways, and it is just mind-blowing to really, once you get into it, that all these cells have these special functions and they all do their own things. It's awesome. But anyways, so an example of that would be the false coral snake that is immune to the poison of the poison dart frog. It didn't say necessarily how that worked, but I'm going to assume that it was exposed, or that some members of the population were exposed in just the right amount for them to be able to build immunity. So that is also why, for certain things, treating with antibiotics, for example, you need to use the antibiotics. You can't just use them, stop, and then use them, stop them prematurely, because what can happen is that the bacteria can build an immunity to it, and it'll certain members of the population will have a mutation and they will go forward immune, which is a big problem. So that's why things like when you talk about antibiotics, there's a reason they tell you don't stop taking it, because there's if you have something going on, it's best to take it until it's completely gone, and then you can stop. So this might have happened with these guys. I have no idea, but I like just sort of poking with my curiosity there. So they will breed year-round if the climate is sufficient. So climate sufficient, good to go. They will breed all the time, and the breeding can also be triggered by rainfall. I don't exactly know how that works, or if that's something that's interesting. So the female will lay between 1 and 40 eggs, which will then be fertilized by the male. And they will generally hatch. They call it hatch. I don't know if that's the technical term for it. I'm going to assume it is, but they will hatch between 10 and 18 days. So we're talking a very short amount of time, right? We've had animals that have gestation periods of over 2 years, right? But now we're talking, well, those are gestation periods. These are hatching periods. So I guess they don't really compare that much. But anyways, 10 and 18 days for hatching. The hatchlings will then go onto the parents' backs. So this means that they will get a piggyback ride to where they need to go, to their little nursery. And their nursery is oftentimes or usually 100% of the time, I would imagine, a small pool of water that is between the leaves of bromeliads or other epiphytes, so other sorts of plants. From this, I assume it's a certain class of plants. So the second they're born, they get a free piggyback ride. That's awesome. So the parents will bring them. If you haven't seen it before, there are videos and pictures of these sorts of worm-looking things on top of their backs. Of course, these are the tadpoles that they transport. But it's very cool how they know that it's time for a piggyback ride. So they will live from 1 to 3 years, and they can live up to 10 years in captivity. So we see them in captivity will live plenty of time longer. The tricolored poison frog can live up to 25 years. For an animal that weighs about an ounce, that is a very, very significant amount of time. 25 years for a small frog. So we can see that in captivity, they thrive a lot more than they do when they are not thrive. I'm not going to use the word thrive. I'm going to use the word, their life expectancy is much higher in captivity than it is in the wild. And the conservation status for them, it really varies widely because we have so many species. So while some of them are listed as least concern, meaning we don't really have to worry about them, and they're thriving in their environment and their environment's totally fine, their habitat's intact, some of them are considered endangered. So we have this difference between certain species. Their main threats are, of course, habitat loss. We have collections for pet trades, and they have a disease, a fungal disease that affects them, and it is called, okay, I'm going to try this, chytridiomycosis. So that is a fungal disease that affects them greatly. I assume that's probably why they have a lower lifespan in the wild, is because they have the, not only are they exposed to predators, but they're exposed to some fungal diseases. And in certain zoos or places where they're kept, they will have sort of this antifungal medicine or some sort of regimen to make sure that it doesn't happen in a captive environment. So they are popular pets generally because they look very cool. They're multicolored, interesting looking, bright colors. But of course you have to be careful with them. So they require high humidity and controlled temperatures. So you need to know what you're doing, and I assume you need to have a certain round of investment at the beginning because you're going to need a good area to keep them in. So high humidity, controlled temperatures. And we're going to the end of the show here. We're about to go to the name. Where did the name poison dart come from? If you haven't already figured it out, I'm going to tell you right now. So they're used by people in Central and South America, and they use them for darts to tip their darts. So when they hunt animals, they have a much easier time, because in this area, rather than arrows, I believe that they used more blow darts. I'm trying to kind of catch up on my history there a little bit, but I believe so. So these darts are tipped with this poison, and because it has this toxin on it, obviously, it will disable the animal a lot faster, and it'll save them a lot of time and effort to hunt, because then of course they get hit by the toxin, their muscles can't really relax, and it takes about 3 minutes apparently for the toxin to completely do its job and do what it does best. So one thing I'm going to say, if you do have these guys as pets, just be careful, because of course if we're talking secretion, this means that it's coming on the outside of the animal. So with the newt, where we covered in the newt episode, where we have the toxin only really if you consume them for some of these guys, but for the poison dart frog, it secretes it through the pores, so it's on the outside too. So you don't want to touch it, because we have very interesting skin structure where we can absorb certain things. And there are things on the outside of that frog sometimes that you don't want to absorb, obviously. So if you do want to get these guys as pets, you need to make sure that you know what you're doing. You do plenty of research and you are careful out there. Okay, so I thank all of you for tuning in to today's episode. It feels a little bit shorter. I might have gone a little bit shorter, but the poison dart frog had a decent amount of facts, but not too many. It didn't have any sorts of interesting behaviors that I was able to expand on too much. But I hope you still enjoyed. So again, if you want to hear your animal on the podcast and you want to be shouted out on the show, go ahead and log on to relaxwithanimalfacts.com and send an animal request. It'll be right there at the top. If you're on mobile, if you're on your laptop, it doesn't matter. Or if you want, you could always email directly to relaxwithanimalfacts@gmail.com. It is totally up to you. If you enjoyed the show, make sure you share. Sharing really helps the show out and helps it keep going. We're about to hit 1,000 downloads worldwide, so that is very exciting. I appreciate all of you out there. We are all part of this beautiful animal family, this balance that we all have struck here. I wouldn't say balance necessarily, because I'm sure we have a lot of things that we could work on, but regardless, we're working on that together. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you on the next podcast episode with the next animal. Take care.